welcome, Sharon. Excited to have you here on Accelerate podcast. And the podcast is really around building product and also your product career, if you will. So we will be accelerate your product, accelerate your business, and also accelerate your personal growth as well. So all the tips and insights and your experience will be super helpful for our audience. So welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right, so let's kick it off. First, let's share a little bit of your background and given our topic around acceleration, as well as today in the way that we are operating in an AI and agentic world, what are some of the top mind of topics you'd like to cover today?
Yeah, sure. Background, I've been in product management my entire technology career, which is approaching about 20 years now. Started in late or mid-stage startup, a company called DocStock that was acquired by Intuit. Then I got to work for Intuit for about 5 years. And there I really learned what I would call classic product management, really Scott Cook's style of innovation, design for delight, really focused on the customer, rapid prototyping, this IDEO style of product management. And then from there, I went to a company called House Call Pro, which is a leading field service management solution that builds technology for your plumbers and the electricians that come out and serve your home, which was a ton of fun, a great team. I then went and started my own company. Well, I say my own company. I was part of the founding team of a company called Clovers that was looking at trying to reevaluate or reinvent the hiring process using conversational insights to give hiring teams a lot more intel into who they were looking at and help them make better hiring decisions. And now I'm at JLL, and JLL is a 200-year-old commercial real estate operations company that about 5 years ago started to invest in property technology. And from there, they started to acquire a lot of technology, more or less to support their operational verticals. So they do things like leasing, capital markets, facilities management, lease administration, and then my world, which is property management specifically. So it's very much an inorganic type of technology org where it's a bunch of coupled together applications that were not homegrown, obviously, that are working to support the businesses. And the businesses are, some of the oldest industrial type of businesses that you could possibly imagine.
Wow, look at the wealth of your experiences from startups being acquired and then work in a large organization and then go to the field services and now in startups and then back to a larger organization. So when you think about that journey along from company to company, different size of company, what are some of the commonalities in product management across these roles?
Definitely, it's nothing beats just getting to know your customers. I think for me, as I've gone across these different phases of a company, from very beginning to growth stage startup to legacy app like Intuit and TurboTax, it was still innovating, to this kind of a hybrid role of very legacy operational company that's adopting technology. In each At each phase, it doesn't matter. You cannot build great tech if you don't deeply know your customer. So from hopping from one sector to another, from field service management to taxes to the hiring process to now property management, you have to re-humble yourself, and you really have to realize that you don't know anything again when you start over, and you've got to deeply, as much as possible, walk in the shoes of the people that you're serving. And if you don't do that, if you cannot if you don't have that customer empathy, and if you don't take the time to do that, then you're not going to be successful, regardless of the things that you build. And AI is a great enabler now. We can build things faster. We can solve problems more seamlessly than before. Still got to understand who you're solving for and what the problem is in the first place.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned, obviously, Scott Cook at Intuit make it really well known of a follow your home, right? Follow customer home and the customer journey. And it's funny, we talk about the earlier days when I was at PayPal, we were very market and a customer focused because we have to go internationally in my area. So you really have to understand how different market people operate in different ways. And then as the company gets bigger, you get more comfortable with where you are. And then we gone through a transformation uh, practice. Actually, we brought in members from Intuit to PayPal to have
Mm,
that customer-centric view of how to, kind of rebuild the muscle. So as you talk about a customer and customer-centric view, I want to also just kind of like expand the product management role to beyond product manager, because I think, a lot of times and I personally have seen that as well, is the same product manager, they are successful in one company, not necessarily in the other, or sometimes even in one area, but not the other, even with their like best practices and others. So what are some of the factors you've seen that would affect the overall the outcomes or impact of a product
yeah.
discipline?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's one element that has to do with the ability to execute versus the ability to think strategically. And the companies that execute more a feature factory type of model, to use the empowered terminology, uh, you're looking for people who could execute really well. That's the goal. Can you take this request and then turn it into shippable code? I think that is a universal need, right? So regardless of the kind of company you're working for, you've got to be able to execute well if you're a frontline product manager. But as a company transitions from a feature factory model to more of an empowered model, some folks don't make that transition very well because now they're being asked to not execute a feature, but they're being asked to solve a problem. And a lot of people have fun with that and step up and rise to the challenge. And some folks don't know how to operate in that way. They continuously ask, well, what am I supposed to do? They're looking to their leaders to make decisions for them because that's been the historical way the company has operated. And so I have seen some folks that have a little harder time transitioning to that full ownership model once it's put in front of them. So that's one piece. And I do think there's now another vector that I'm seeing as it relates to how teams are evolving with AI, that there's this sort of new emergent role that I don't know what to call other than just a builder. Can you build? Now you still need the product taste and discernment to understand if you're building something that is valuable, that solves a pain, that is applicable to enough people to be commercialized, right? That's all still very, very much part of the role, but you're seeing engineers do this, great product thinking engineers. You're seeing designers sometimes do this, or you're seeing product folks that are diving in and learning how to ship code. And the people that I'm seeing that are most successful are not, they're not precious about the boundaries between roles. They're happy and they are flexible with the duties starting to blur. And there are some people that are holding on to the historical nature of the way the role has been defined and feeling maybe threatened or their toes are being stepped on if there's an engineer that is, bringing a problem to the table, or there's a PM that's shipping code. And I think that the way this software world is evolving, it's gonna reward those who are willing to reevaluate the nature of the role and not be so precious about the definitions that we've had in the past along the verticals of software engineer, product manager, designer.
You said two things that are very, very interesting. So I want to kind of expand that a little bit more. So the first one you actually mentioned about commercialize it. So I'll put that on the side for a minute because I think that's a lot more to discuss. But the first part I want to talk about is sort of the boundaries of roles and then probably the composition of the team you're on. And I totally hear you in the way where traditionally organization would have specific roles. Not only that, we go into the company, sometimes we define the org charts. What's our roles and responsibility? You do this, I did this. This is your
Mhm.
deliverable and how we work together. Now with, with AI and then with the speed of building, a speed of everything so much faster. So talk a little bit about like, does it change the structure of your team? Are you changing the team structure or roles? How do you evaluate, like as a product manager or as a designer, how do I know I'm successful if I don't have a clear delineation, like what I'm responsible for? What, so how's your organization navigate through that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I have the perfect answer. I will say that we are on a cultural journey in my organization to move to more of an empowered model. So in the past, the development teams of the R&D organization really has been asked to build features, not solve problems. And now we are moving to our model where we've got three strategic KPIs for our flagship software. I've asked the team to think about how do you save time for your users. So everything that we build should either save time, should create value in the building that's trackable. Material, we call it NOI in the CRE space, net operating income. So you should be
Right.
able to reduce expenses or increase revenue, and you should be able to quantify that. Or we should be able to increase deployment speed. So how fast can you get a new account up and running or a new building in the product? If it doesn't move the needle on one or more of those things, then we shouldn't be doing it. And now the teams are given the leeway to come back and say, well, we did some investigation, we did some analysis, we talked to some customers, we see this opportunity, and we believe in it, and we think we should go and solve for it. And I'm seeing engineers come to the table more than ever before with ideas because of this. Now, when we talk about team composition, we haven't made any big changes yet. We did run an experiment the last quarter with a very small team, and their entire charter was to basically rewrite our front end of our flagship app. Um, Not the entire app, but specifically a view for tenants. We have property teams, tenants, and vendors, broadly speaking, that use the application. This rewrite was using a design system that's LLM optimized, that was built internally, but no one else in JLL had really used it yet or vetted it. So they, a very small team, one product manager, one designer, two engineers, were tasked of rewriting the entire tenant portal. And this is the kind of thing that would have taken a team at least 2 quarters, or if not more, a team of 6, 7, 8 people, at least a couple quarters to complete. And they completed it from scratch in a quarter and then set the foundation for the rest of the teams to run quickly, because within that, they built a bunch of new components that are relevant to our application. So I saw that two things kind of happening. One, around the empowered model, there's now engineers, designers coming to the table with a lot more ideas, and then they can iterate and prototype them very quickly and get them in front of customers. So that's not changing the makeup of the team, but it is starting to blur those role boundaries more, right? Which may lead to changes later on. And then we have this experimental team of 4 people that's just shown that they could do a mountain of work with really tight cycles, very dedicated focus, with designers shipping code, PM shipping code, engineers developing components, mixing this model together. So I think what we'll see is a new world where we have smaller teams, probably more co-located, at least overlapping time zones, that are really more rapidly cycling through problems, especially if they're empowered and they're given a problem to solve. And I also think that, especially in these more, in a company like mine, where we basically build software that we sell to the direct market, but we also serve JLL. That's our primary client. So our client is they are our colleagues. So inviting them into that life cycle, into the development cycle, so that they can give us direct feedback, almost as if they're part of the team, is another shift that I'm seeing could potentially happen, because we can prototype very quickly, get something in front of someone, get that feedback in tight loops, and then ship to production in ways that we couldn't before, that wouldn't require so much, I think, additional time from that SME with these like heavy design review meetings, right? You just throw them a prototype, get some quick feedback, and then move forward.
Right. So that is really cool. This is something we also heard from and also experienced in our own customer base as well, is that, with agents on the team, so then your 5 people Scrum team, all of a sudden you only need 3 people because the other 2 or 3 are taken as agents, right? So that you still have a kind of 5 or maybe even more in terms of capacity, but you have a smaller teams that can do a lot much faster, and then you can iterate a lot faster. Um, do you see more teams as a result, or you just don't grow as much? You would do more. Does it change any of meaning? One of sort of our fully transforming to agentic operating model similar to yours is that they have a same number of like headcounts overall, but they would have like smaller teams, like a half the size. And then all of a sudden, instead of 30 teams, they have like 60 or 70 teams. But then, so that's like the first question. Do you see smaller team and also more teams? The second one is, what about cross-team dependencies? Is there any cross-team dependencies? They're all just like a once like individual operate. How do you manage like at the level higher across
Yeah.
your teams?
Yeah. So I kind of have two hats. If I think about my product portfolio, essentially there's this acquired group of apps, a company called Building Engines that has been serving property management for about 20 years. JLL acquired that company and the companies that it had previously acquired. So about 6 applications under Building Engines, one of which is called Prism, which is our flagship app. Then on the other side, I own the entirety of the property management technology suite for JLL, which is a combination of the Building Engines platform, but also some homegrown analytics tools. But also now we're rolling out Claude internally, and we're thinking through how do we teach property management teams to use Claude, especially if we can build them frameworks, MCPs, access to our enterprise data platform, the whole kind of teach a person to fish model. So I think realistically, if I can predict out maybe the next year, because I think further than that is basically futile at this point. Maybe even a year is futile at this point. um, on the property management technology stack for JLL, I do think there's an opportunity for smaller targeted teams. You basically get 2 to 3 people in a room. You identify. So right now we're actually doing a series of follow me homes with property managers to understand what are these high friction workflows, period, in your life. It doesn't matter what tools you're using. Let's just understand them. And then from there, we'll quantify with the survey, and then we'll go and address these different workflows. So I can see as a result of this, small teams that are fully targeted at you're going to go solve and automate this high pain workflow.
Right.
Um, and then pick 5 teams that just go in small hyper focused sessions to go automate those things in collaboration with SMEs, using potentially tools like Claude, not necessarily building that new apps, or maybe just wrapping a UI on a cobbled together,
Right.
surface that's using MCPs. I don't think that's as realistic on the building engine side of the house, because the reality is that it's a SaaS platform. It has maintenance, right? So just small things like a bug's reported.
Right.
What team's gonna triage it and take care of it? You have to have these zones of expertise and ownership over parts of the product just to operate effectively.
Right.
So I don't think we'll see as much proliferation of teams on that side, just because of the demands of running a large scale SaaS enterprise platform and the need to maintain it.
Right, right. Interesting delineation. I also seen something in companies as well. The product managers are taking on 2 roles. One is to, existing product, either improve and enhance or revamp them to serve existing external customers. And then there are definitely a lot of internal kind of product manager role. Like you said, it's like,
Mm.
how do we using existing technology to revamp internal workflows and make it in, because the product managers are so perfectly designed for that type of role, right? So you kind of like transform your business by using technology you're familiar with and take the product management mentality. And that's really good because that is a greenfield type of product, right? So 0 to 1. Um, How do you see that? Like, I don't want to use the word like internal product, but in some ways, the internal product is much lighter weight than a traditional development. How do you see that? Is it sort of mostly go and alive and then sort of like, hey, up you go, or that become a ongoing thing so that over time, would that be something also similar to your, I don't want to use a SaaS product, but like more mature product has more capabilities, and then you may have like uh, revamp or integrating them. How do you see that evolve over a period of time?
Yeah, I've thought about it and I think there'll be a spectrum. So if I just think about the variety of use cases, there are some processes that, if I go back to the PMT side of the house, the property management technology side of the house, which is really, okay, we've got all these very antiquated, very high friction workflows using tons of tools. I'll give you an example. Today, there is something like $1.2 billion of transactions that are reconciled with property management within JLL in North America. The transaction being a tenant pays their landlord. That payment has to be mapped to an invoice.
Right,
That payment comes in still in commercial real estate. You'll be surprised how little appetite there is for modernized payment systems. It comes in wire, it comes in paper check. That's our bank deposit, and then you're kind of trying to play Sherlock on this payment that's come in and
right,
match it to the right invoice because there's no connective tissue between the two. And we
right,
actually have teams of people right now that are employed that do this. And it's onerous. It takes us a long time to do, longer than it should, in 2026. So we're building an agent right now that's just auto mapping. Grab the payment, scan the database of invoices, match the two together. Now, that can't be fully automated because of compliance reasons. You're always going to need a human in the loop. You're always going to need to make sure that there's a lot of security controls too on the application because it's accessing payment data, right? So that kind of thing I see as being like a mini app
right,
that we would put into production that someone with the expertise would come in, and it just makes their job a lot faster and easier, right? Because
right,
they can start from 80% or 90% or just confirm matches.
right,
But then I think that there's a lot of things that will likely be the product is actually a skill. It might be like a cam reconciliation skill,
right,
or a skill to I don't know, look back at the tenant data, all the tenant interactions that you have in your inbox and in your application systems when a tenant's coming up for renewal to see if there's any gotchas or negotiation levers that you should be thinking of. And I think these skills are sort of templates that can be adjusted, maybe property by property, but the product is actually that skill. We hand that skill to all the property managers and say, this is going to help you accelerate this particular task that we know that you're doing. You might need to tweak it, for your specific need, but it's already there 90%.
something very interesting. And that's sort of like no surprise. There's a whole SaaS apocalypse happening, right? Because in the past there were tools to do the things that are very similar to you do, which is the reconcile payments and um, account receivable reconciliation or some like invoice reconciliation type of tool or software like you can buy. Now, in the case you have, it's like you build something internally, and how do you decide? Like, is this something we can easily build? So then therefore we're gonna build it. And then maybe we build something that's 80% good that, like you said, it turning into a skill that people can kind of speed up a little bit of their work, but not like a full-blown SaaS tool, which or even AI SaaS tool, still SaaS tool, right? Not a full-blown tool that would do the work better. So do you perform some sort of build versus buy for internal tools? And if so, how do you think about that process?
Yeah, it's still evolving. On the skill side, the context is that JLL's mid-flight of rolling out Claude to all employees. So in my mind, if there is an AI optimized software product on the market that can go, for example, and I don't know, run analyses on all the leases that you have in your building, and then provide you with, details about the differences between leases, the charges that should be charged back to tenants versus what you can't recoup, all these nuances that gets lost because these things tend to live in OneDrive or in SharePoint or on your local machine somewhere.
Wow.
Um, my question would be to start with, well, could we get pretty close with Claude and a skill? Do we really need to go procure a new software solution for that? So there's this threshold I think that we're still developing, and we'll have to kind of feel our way through it, whether or not that there's an 80%. So 80% in our world is actually really good because we're starting from the base where the bar is super low.
Right, right, right. It's actually
So
really good. It's actually very good. I think given the investment to build this, 80% good with 20% effort, and at least
mhm.
you can solve the problem. And in some ways, sometimes it becomes something to say, hey, actually, it's a worthwhile to get something better and cover more. But at least you have, I don't want to say a prototype, but it is a working software at, maybe not as with all the bells and whistles, but cover most of the common cases. It's actually really good evolution. See companies that decide to say, how do we streamline internal workflow and with the minimal amount of the effort, and then if it turn out to be something way more powerful we can get after we using this, then we can go like this. I like how you take this sort of the ROI based approach to say what we could do and improve some ROI level, and then you can probably look at another if there's additional needs or it's good enough.
Exactly. Because we haven't even explored yet the potential.
Right.
We're still, like I said, we're still rolling out Claude. So we haven't even scratched the surface of what it can do. So I need to be convinced that it can't get us really close on a particular workflow. And that workflow is pervasive enough and painful enough that it's really worth investing in some separate tool. The thing that we will invest in, because it's going to be necessary regardless, is figuring out how to get data from all of the fragmented places that it is today across the org into some place centralized. So we do have an enterprise data platform today at JLL. In the property management space specifically, though, it's really kind of just a collection of tables from different sources, different application sources. And a lot of the really rich data, like vendor contracts, or like I said, like tenant leases, or even just historical, maybe sentiment from a tenant is in places like a local folder or a SharePoint or an email, an inbox. So all of that data right now, it's so all over the place that an AI can't really act on it universally. It can act on it, maybe if you have the right connectors, it can act on what you know. But if we wanted to build an AI that can optimize or do really smart things, say build portfolio level insights across leases for an entire client, we need all those leases to be in a single location. And that's going to be true regardless of what AI solution we put on top of it. That's the really sticky, sweet sauce that we have to solve for. And
Right.
then the application layer is it's kind of secondary, honestly. And I think I have a theory that Claude's gonna get us really far. Claude plus potentially Agent Core. We're using AWS Agent Core as well.
Right, right. Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Even for, one of the things that, if I were to say, not to put a plug in Dragonboat, but really the problem we're solving for Dragonboat is not the data, it's the first problem, but that's only the start of the solution, right? So data would have to have the semantics that is understood because in different systems, you have different views and or you would have even in the same system, different workspaces that you have things definitely definitions are different. So when you start trying to put them together, it's really difficult to make sense of it. Like which one is the latest, which one is actually up to date. So having a source of truth that not only just having the data, also semantics and also the timeliness and also connecting them together is like it's like a ground zero for every single agentic organizations. Yeah.
Exactly. And in commercial real estate, it's funny. Sometimes I wonder if it's an inverse equation where the more likely you are to have a cogent ontology for your subject space is sort of inversely related to how new that space is. So in commercial real estate, unlike a lot of other sectors, there's no agreed upon commercial ontological definition, even for something like a property,
Right,
or a building.
right,
So we see every single data source will define it just a little bit differently.
right,
What is, and sometimes in our world, it's more about what is purchased. So that could just be a couple of floors within a building for a given
right,
client, not the whole address. So there's all this nuance, and you're totally right. If you don't kind of nail the semantic layer, if you don't have unified identifiers for a given object across these different systems, then the AI can do its best to infer, but it's
right.
going to trip up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And over time, the amount of even the best AI today infer will be something 50 to 80% correct. And then, even at 80%, that's like a tremendous like accuracy and good. It's still not okay. You still need a human in the middle. You still need a much higher deterministic result to be able to operate on things when it start to come to financials and the terms and projections and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, wow, that's pretty interesting. Now, talk about so we definitely covered the speed. Sounds like you have your teams are operating pretty well, have a smaller teams and they're having sort of more condensed roles and outcome-based goals. And I really gave the team a lot of uh, direction and the focus. Now let's talk about the complexity. You did mention a little bit about the SaaS teams being around for a while, then it's a larger platform and also you have a features and bugs. How does the complexity in today's speed and a much, much faster speed um, change or you adapt to that? And then any new challenges coming through and any older problems that no longer kind of relevant?
hmm Maybe I can talk about what is getting in the way, I think, of us really getting up to the speed I'd like to see on the SaaS side of the house. And then once we get there, the challenges that I see once we are operating at that level of R&D speed. So it's a classic greenfield, brownfield conundrum.
Right.
The brownfield conundrum being when you've got a code base that exists that can be hard even for a human to parse. You've got functions wrapped into functions. You don't necessarily always have the best documented notes. It's not clear. Our front end, which is why we're doing a rewrite, is a bit of a hodgepodge. We've got 20 hand-rolled components for the same form field, and you've got to trace back across the code when you're making a change. Is that going to touch something that it shouldn't affect? It's going to cause a bug. It just creates all these delays. So on the one hand, we're fixing that front end issue by doing this rewrite. We still are going to have this back end challenge that I think we'll need to figure out how to overcome. How do we make our existing code base easier for harness engineering to be effective? That I don't have a great answer for. I think it looks something though like the engineers becoming more mini dev managers, and
Right.
when their little harness or their little AI engineer employees stub their toe on something, they go figure out why. Because it's probably something that isn't very clear in the code in the first place. So then go correct that. And then the engineer's job really working with the AI is to create a code base that is optimized for AI at the end of the day. And that's going to take time and I think a lot of learning and cycles. So I think there is a fundamental challenge unless you've just got pristine code, which frankly, I've never worked for a company that has,
Today.
so maybe in pockets, but it's just a challenge of having a lot of different contributors. And also when you're running from a feature factory perspective, you don't always kind of put in the why because the why isn't always known to an engineer if that wasn't articulated or if everyone isn't marching around the same goal. So I think though once we solve that problem and say we're starting to really cook with gas, as they say, then I think the challenge becomes around enablement and go to market. Because I personally don't think that our clients have the appetite to consume the change that we might be able to produce, the rate of change. And that's going to maybe be the bottleneck. Not, everyone doesn't want to come into their interface every day and see a net new change or feel like they have to constantly learn something new unless it's very, very easy. Of course, that's the goal, but there's always resistance to change. So we'll have to kind of figure out how do we get around that? How do we iterate and make sure that we're improving, but not introducing so much perceived churn in the product that our support articles can't keep up. And when people reach out to CS, that CS has the information they need to answer the question correctly, that our API documentation stays up to date, that our marketing website stays up to date, that our sales collateral is accurate and true, and that our demo environments, are clean. So all of that sort of downstream enablement piece, I think, yeah, it's not clear to me how it keeps up. There's a process piece, but even if we nail the process piece, there's the will our customers kind of almost become exhausted with the frequency of change because we're dealing in, I think, in our space with a clientele that isn't necessarily keen to always be using the latest and greatest, right? They just want something stable that they are comfortable with and confident with.
Right. This is a really good call out. I think maybe we'll kind of take that opportunity, sort of wrap up the chat here. By the way, it's so amazing. A lot of great insights. I love this. Um, One thing I want to call out a little bit more is this. I think maybe just take away for some of us think about it is that when we build product, make assumptions to say this a problem worth to solve, right? That will be one of the key factors for us to decide and prioritize in building it. And that's based on assumptions sometimes in the sort of the past gear on ROI, return or impact to customers. Now, when we have like a avalanche of amount of the changes and the improvement and the things to customer, the assumed impact may not be as big because
Right.
the customer get hit by so much. So I think that's a topic we would love to check back to hear more because I think some of our other customers are having or guests are having the same thing to say, we made assumption, we decided to go ahead to build this feature because we think that's the impact, but turn out because the amount of impact coming from all the teams coming to the customer, that assumed impact is like dramatically smaller.
Hmm.
Because the appetite, like you mentioned, the appetite to absorb the change, the appetite for sales to sale, for the appetite for support to support, all of a sudden that part of the bottleneck goes up. So I would love to hear, maybe somewhere checking with you if you learn new things and how the change for all of us is the speed is there and some of the complexity change and a lot of our assumptions in the impact are also evolving. Very interesting time, isn't it?
It's an amazing time. It's never been more fun to be in software development and to build product. I honestly wish sometimes I could go back to being a senior product manager and just ship stuff because it's so much fun.
Right.
It's
So much
incredible.
faster, right? So
So
much,
much faster.
yeah, so
Mhm.
much faster. This is amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. I love this conversation. So much great insights, so many great tidbits. Would you like to add a few words to kind of close this up?
Sure. Let me think about a good closing statement. I think we are living in the future. No one has the answers. It's a wild ride, but it is a lot of fun. And if you're a kind of person who really loves to solve problems and solve them quickly, I think there's no better time to be in technology. The watch out is going to be making sure that you are picking the right problems to solve. And that's why product management is still going to be, I think, key to this new world.
100%. Picking the right product to solve and always keep the customer in mind. I love that. Thank you so much, Sharon. Really love it.